I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
The Japanese surrender to the Allies on August 15, 1945, was made official weeks later in a formal ceremony aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. World War II was over. However, the time for global celebration would be short-lived. Japan had occupied Korea since 1910, and upon surrender, Korea was liberated, and scores of defeated Japanese forces were to be removed from the peninsula nation. To do so, the victorious Allies, the Americans and the Soviets, divided Korea into two temporary zones of occupation at the 38th parallel. Due to the politics of the Cold War in 1948, two separate governments were established: the Republic of Korea in Seoul to the south, and the Soviet-supported Democratic People's Republic of Korea in Pyongyang to the north. Each claimed to be the legitimate government for all of Korea. In the north, a Chinese civil war had been fought with the longtime Chinese revolutionary and communist-aligned Mao Zedong. He defeated the U.S.-supported Chinese Nationalist Party. International peace proved fleeting, with the rising tide of communism and growing threat of nuclear warhead expansion. Emboldened by the communist Red Wave, and with the support of Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin and Chinese leader Mao, the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung made his move. Roughly 1,000 Soviet-trained North Korean troops, or KPA, moved south, crossing the 38th parallel. The invasion of the Republic of Korea had begun. Led by President Harry S. Truman of the United States, the United Nations voted to defend the South Koreans.
What is at stake is the free way of life, the right to worship as we please, the right to express our opinions, the right to raise our children in our own way, the right to choose our jobs, the right to plan our future, and the right to live without fear. All these are bound up in the present action of the United Nations to put down aggression in Korea.
The US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and 13 other allies agreed to provide military support to South Korea, while China and the Soviet Union backed North Korea. With the Soviet Union providing intelligence, the North Koreans quickly advanced south. UN forces joined the effort, providing a 140-mile defense line along the Pusan perimeter, or the southeastern tip of South Korea. The Battle of Pusan nearly brought the South to its brink, and defeat would have come, if not for the scores of UN troops and supplies entering the Busan port. Supreme Commander General MacArthur requested an airborne regimental combat team, like had been used in World War II, to drop behind enemy lines and disrupt the opposition. With training accelerated, the division organized the 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team and the advance party of the 3rd Battalion of the Rakkasans, a Japanese term translating to falling umbrella man. The 187th First Jump would be part of Operation Chromite in the Battle of Yeongju. The success of MacArthur's plan relied on a strong and coordinated sea, air, and land force, as well as the element of surprise. The mission to cut and clear the Supgan-Yeongju Highway and rail line that was leading the 8th Army advance northwards from Pyongyang and stop an estimated 30,000 retreating North Korean soldiers. During the battle, the 187th Regiment made successful combat parachute assaults near the town of Sukyan and Sanyang, North Korea. However, as the combat team started southwards, they came under heavy assault. UN forces aided the Americans with an amphibious attack at Incheon and pushed the invaders back into North Korea within 40 miles of the Manchurian border. The Incheon landings were a crushing blow for the KPA, catching them unprepared and breaking their weakened forces along the perimeter. Nearly 75,000 troops and 261 naval vessels led to the recapture of the South Korean capital of Seoul during Operation Chromite. With MacArthur convinced he could reunify all of Korea, President Truman authorized him to go north of the pre-June boundary, the 38th parallel. UN forces continued their advance into North Korea to take Pyongyang, the oldest city in Korea, just 70 miles from the Yalu River. With the bulk of the North Korean army greatly diminished and lacking armor, the Chinese issued a warning it would not tolerate UN troops crossing the Yalu River on its border.
The Chinese had warned the United Nations that while they would permit South Korean forces to go to the Yalu, they would not permit United Nations forces to go there.
With a plan for complete victory to capture all of Korea, the policymakers, MacArthur and President Truman, considered the Chinese People's Volunteer Army threat merely a bluff, and the U.S. continued its push northward. UN forces seemed on the verge of not only victory in South Korea, but of total victory, which included the liberation of North Korea and the reunification of the peninsula. However, as part of a counterattack, 200,000 Chinese were sent to aid the North Koreans. And on October 19, 1950, the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, or PVA, crossed the Yalu and entered the war. Korean liberation and unification were off the table due to the massive intervention of the PVA. With the addition of Chinese forces, the war swept back to Seoul, and invading North Korean troops advanced as far as Busan.
We fell back and evacuated out through, some went out through Wonsan, and we went out to Hanyang Harbor. And I may say that at Hanyang, we held the line from the Chinese while we evacuated over 100,000 Koreans.
The UN launched a counteroffensive to reestablish the pre-war boundary along the 38th parallel. On Good Friday, March 23, 1951, 120 C-119s, also called flying boxcars, and 8 World War II-era C-46 commando transports dropped 640 tons of equipment and nearly 3,500 paratroopers to link up with Task Force Groudon at the drop zone and Musan-ni. The Rakkasans, 187th Airborne Element, led Operation Tomahawk as the second and final parachute assault into Korea. As part of a larger offensive over the mountainous terrain of Operation Courageous, Tomahawk was designed to stop large numbers of Chinese, North Korean forces from retreating northward and trap them between the Han and Imjin rivers north of Seoul. Flying the new twin-boom C-119 allowed for substantial weaponry to be brought to battle, marking the first time 105mm howitzers and other heavy equipment were dropped successfully into combat zones. The virtual element Musan-ni and daring link-up with armored task force stopped the enemy. It was a bitter battle, fighting along 25 miles of mud, fraught with frequent hand-to-hand combat.
Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Yeah, they were called the 187 Regimental Combat Team. They were tough. Yeah, they were some bad boys that came over there.
Another link-up with the 3rd Infantry Division secured a line along the 38th parallel.
At that time, I was wounded. My head, artillery shrapnel. I think no doctor was going to repair me, So I might as well go out all the way. I put my bayonet in my rifle, and I said, "Here I come."
The resilience, ability, and bravery of the 187th helped turn the tide of the battle, providing time for UN forces to regroup. In early 1951, the Chinese offensive lost its momentum, and the UN, strengthened by the revitalized 8th U.S. Army, led by General Matthew B. Ridgway, recaptured Seoul and advanced back to the 38th parallel. For months, battle lines remained relatively unchanged, with conflict stalemated. The Truman administration had abandoned plans to reunite North and South Korea, fearing an escalation into a third world war. As the battle continued, Korean and Chinese prisoners and detainees, numbering nearly 150,000, both communist and non-communist, were held on the southern Korean island of Kojido. The Gyeonggi prison camp became known for its violent uprisings, deadly riots, and chaos when Camp Commandant Brigadier General Francis Dodd was held hostage for 4 days in May of 1952. The prison was on the verge of widespread rebellion. It was June 10, 1952, when the new camp commander, Brigadier General Hayden L. Boatner, ordered the 187th Regimental Combat Team and the 64th Tank Battalion to take control.
The main reason that we had to deploy to Kojido is because the prisoners, I don't know if you call it rioting, but they were out of control. And then they just told us, we're gonna go in and you bring them out. Make sure they come out, dead or alive.
The Rakkasans were called upon to quell the violence and suppress the prisoner rebellion, and they did. President Truman did not pursue re-election, and on December 2nd, 1952, then President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower went to Korea, seeking an end to the conflict. Combat concluded on July 27, 1953, when the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed and prisoners were exchanged.
We have stopped the shooting. That means much to the fighting men and their families, and it will allow some of the grievous wounds of Korea to heal. Therefore, I am thankful.
All told, Seoul passed to opposing sides 4 times, and the communists were pushed back to positions near the 38th parallel, very close to where the war had begun. Without a peace treaty, the war ended in a truce, with Korea separated by a demilitarized zone, DMZ, still standing today. This war remains a frozen conflict.
They call it the Forgotten War, but Colonel Weber, he's our hero,
Right.
lost a leg and an arm. He calls it the Forgotten Victory. Because if you look at South Korea, it's prosperous, freeways, high-rise hotels, everything. And North Korea is still a third world country.
The contributions of the 187th were most consequential, helping to bring the Korean War to a close and cementing their proud legacy. The Rakkasan successes in Korea changed the face of airborne warfare and recognized the critical impact of the paratrooper. Throughout history, soldiers of Fort Campbell have met the moment, defending freedom across the globe, each and every time. Today, the Fort Campbell Historical Foundation is proud to tell the stories of the 101st Airborne Division, the 5th Special Forces Group, and the 160th Special Ops Aviation Regiment, with the creation of the Tennessee Wings of Liberty Museum. Built to honor these heroes, the museum will educate, honor, and inspire, focusing on the events surrounding one of the most storied units in combat history, set to open its doors in 2025. Tennessee Wings of Liberty Museum will keep these great legacies alive for generations to come. We remember their service and honor their memory. We will not forget.